I think we're on.
Awesome.
So I am gonna start episode 30. All right. So Henson, if you want to go on mute, that would be fantastic. So I believe we are live to episode 30, Warrior Women in Business. My name is Jasmine Sandler. I am the CEO of Warrior Women in Business. For those of you that don't know anything about Warrior Women in Business and came today to hear Katie Hill, which I'm just so excited that she's on today. I just want to give you a little bit of a background about what Warrior Women in Business actually is. So Warrior Women in Business is a podcast, but it's also a mission-driven organization to support women in business and women in politics and women in the arts. And it's really about bringing together mentors and leaders in business, arts, and law in a way to educate, encourage, and empower women to move forward in equality, in bettering their values, which is a lot of what I talk about in this podcast. We at warriorwomenbusiness.com, you'll find past podcast episodes as well as events. As part of Warrior Women in Business, we run an annual conference called Brand You, which is all around developing female entrepreneurs as thought leaders. And we constantly run events. It's been very hard during COVID. So I would love really to announce a couple of events and classes that we have coming up before I get into today's amazing podcast. So on October 24th, Warrior Women in Business will be holding an exclusive event with Women of Culture. Women of Culture is an organization in New York City that curates art and cultural events. It's really, really fun if you've never been to one. So we are doing an exclusive Good Vibes on the Lower East Side curated art walk, talk, brunch, and obviously cocktails. And so that is going to be Saturday, October 24th. And then the other thing that I'd like to mention is Tina Trevino, who's one of our certified coaches on warriorwomenbusiness.com, who owns Takaya Brands, which is a global women's fashion brand. She's leading us through a 4-part mini course on how to build a fashion empire. So that's on warriorwomenbusiness.com. So I would like to get started today with episode 30. So for any of you, or hopefully most of you, I did last night, who watched the presidential debates, more and more and more in the news today, women are becoming a force in politics, and thank God, but it's a struggle. I don't know much about it, so I asked Katie to be on, and so I've asked Katie Hill to be on. She's a former Congresswoman of California. If you want to wave to the camera, Katie, say hello. I've asked her to be on, but most importantly, she just completely stood out to me. She has a book, and I just told her I can't wait to actually get through it. It is a book really about women's equality, and it's a book about how women struggle through gaining levels of power in their industry. And I know she's going to share some tips on how she has achieved so much in such a young, as a young woman, actually. So I asked her to be on to talk about women's equality, about the struggles that we have, and a lot of women don't even speak up about problems of misogyny. I know I deal with it all the time across my business, across my music, in many different areas, and how we can come together, whether we are alone in a group of men or we have other women. How do we align with those women to move forward? So I'd like to welcome Katie to the show. If you want to go off of mute.
Yep. Hi.
All right.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm super excited for you to talk about. You're the first guest that I've had that has had a political seat. I've had amazing female lawyers on the show, but never anyone from the governmental side. So I think that brings a new perspective to Warrior Women in Business.
Yeah.
And
no, I think that the crossover needs to be happening more. So I'm glad to be here.
All right, fantastic. So I want to start with the first question. So, you've certainly faced adversity as a woman in your political career, and you're an example of what we call war in the Warrior Women world, is a power woman striving for equality. And I feel like I'm one of those. My mom was certainly one of those. My friends are those. And it's really hard, So, in your career, which is a little bit different than most of ours, can you walk us through, firstly, your decision? How did you make the decision to go into politics? And then your experience in achieving the political seat as Congresswoman?
Sure. Well, I was not planning on becoming a politician originally. I was originally planning on becoming a nurse, like my mom and both of my grandmothers. But one thing led to another, and I ended up in the social services sector. So I was running a large homeless services organization.
Oh,
I became the executive director and deputy CEO by the time that I was 26, I think, and got really involved in the policy. Making policy change and expanding these organizations and really working on, the business side of it, right? I worked on mergers, I worked on the finance end, I worked on, housing development. And I think that background really was important to me. But anyway, it was mission oriented, right? It was all about how can we end homelessness for individuals, families, and communities. Then everything 2016 came along and everything changed. It was suddenly about, recognizing that people were coming into my office one after another and didn't know what it meant for us, didn't know what it meant for their jobs, but more importantly for the people that we were serving with Trump in the White House and a Republican held House and Senate. And I felt like I needed to do something, but that the next opportunity to do so would be in the 2018 elections. And I thought, okay, great, I'll get involved somehow. I looked up at that point, there was a tracker called Swing Left that had just emerged. And you could type in your zip code and it would find the closest swing district to you. So I did that. And I found out that the district that I had grown up in, I'd spent my entire life in, was actually the swing district. And I could not believe it because it was this deeply Republican seat growing up. And
where did you grow up?
Santa Clarita, Simi Valley, basically the north side of LA County. But anyway, so it had always been held by a Republican for my whole life. And it turns out that Hillary Clinton had won that district by about 6 points, but the Republican incumbent in Congress had won by about 7. So that's why it was targeted as one of these key seats across the entire country to be able to flip the House. So I was like, great, this is my own neighborhood, my own family, like my whole family lives there. I live there. And I was like, I can get involved deeply. I know this place, right? I can help somebody. But then I found out that the only person that was really planning on running was the guy who had run and lost the last time. And he was a dude who had moved into the district in order to run. He wasn't from there. He was, and I felt just to the bottom of my soul that we wouldn't be able to win it again if we didn't have somebody who truly understood the community and how to kind of balance the progressive, younger, more diverse leaning parts of the district with the ones that are kind of more typical middle class suburban and they're moving, right? But I was like talking about this, I was complaining about it to a bunch of people and saying we have to find the right candidate. I'm all in, but we got to find the right candidate. And then finally somebody said to me, Katie, why don't you run? You're the perfect candidate. Your dad's a cop, your mom's a nurse, you've been running this huge statewide organization. Why wouldn't you? And then I thought, oh my God, you're right. Why wouldn't I? And especially after you watch Donald Trump, win, it just seems like the rules about who can do this are completely changed. But that's the difference between men and women too, right?
But let me interrupt you for a second. That's a good thing. That's a big change.
Yep.
And I think that's something that, that's something that gives us the avenue, right? Is that what we're going to say? It gives us it gives us a lane to kind of jump in, right?
Totally. And I think that, what we saw with the entire wave of the women who ran in 2018, not just women, but men too, but from different backgrounds. I mean, AOC coming directly from bartending, right? Or,
that's my area.
Yeah. I mean, me too. I was a server in restaurants for my entire college career. And so it's like, I think that there was this energy that came out of Trump being elected that is probably the biggest positive, that the only real positive that we're going to be able to get out of this presidency, but it's an important one because it's getting people engaged that absolutely needed to be activated for us to be able to make the changes necessary.
Yeah, fantastic. And that talks about something I think in the history of women. I know your book came out for around the 100th, right? The 100th year of the women's right to vote, which makes perfect sense. It's all these barriers that we're breaking in certain times, and something has to cause those changes. And I think it's you're an example of that, right? And also, I think these examples, women need to be aware of these examples so they can be aware of the ways that they can step in instead of just following routines and listening for signals of things that a woman might say, hey, you know what, that's not okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not okay. And I think that we have to make change. So I'm really happy that you are an example. Okay, so next, you are certainly one of the younger congresswomen, to hold the position. So
yeah,
as a younger woman in politics, and when you think about politics, you think about older white men. I mean, in general, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I do. So, did you find that you were able to find older female allies? And if so, how did you gain support from them? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Actually, from the very beginning, by being a female candidate, there were a number of women in Congress who'd been there for several terms that had started elect Democratic women, and basically the women's caucus. And so they were already, women made up only a small percentage of Congress forever, right? So it's been growing, but they were already a close-knit group. And especially with Nancy Pelosi as the Democratic leader and the speaker both times, she really fostered that and the growth and the kind of I don't know, the sisterhood that exists. And so there were a couple of women in particular. Lois Frankel was one of them, who really kind of brought us as candidates into that fold, and would check on us and see what we needed for help, and just call and be very motherly. And that just kind of continued. And I feel like women, it certainly wasn't just women, but the women really cared and gave you the kind of emotional support that you need as a first-time member of Congress that probably isn't traditional in a mentorship. It's certainly not a male one, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, in the work that I do, I deal with, I do a lot of training for women's groups instead of corporate. And actually, my favorite part of it is getting some of the men involved with women's leadership. Because you need that. We talk a lot about that in Warrior Women in Business, is having male allies in underserved women's groups, organizations, and causes. So is there anything in that you could share in terms of, for the younger women that are listening, in how you might have approached or gained the support of those women? Anything that you could share to help them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, first of all, just being truly respecting and admiring the work that they did as trailblazers, right? Coming before us. And, and it was truly coming from a place of wanting to learn and wanting to I'm not coming up as, this isn't competition. This is, and they were
love it.
Of that kind of frame. I don't know if it was, for me at least, I don't know if it was that we sort of made it I don't know. They could have had this natural tendency anyway, but I think that it's about making room for more women. It's not about trying to edge anyone out, or, there shouldn't be this competition between other women. It should be entirely a support network. And I think that, at least to a large degree, that's what it seemed like it was in my experience in the House.
Good, because that's what it's all about. I mean, this is how we can grow as women. The competition and copycats. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's why I started Warrior Women in Business, to be honest with you.
Really?
Is because I was like, we have a hard enough time beating the men.
Yep, exactly.
Why do we have to beat each other?
Totally. And I think
there's enough opportunity for everyone.
Yeah, and I think it came from this idea that, okay, if there was going to be a single, any women at the table, it was going to be a single woman. And so you didn't want people who are going to possibly oust you. And if you're coming up from the bottom, then you don't want to, that you have to push someone out of the way. But now we have hit the point, and we recognize that we are best served if we stand together and elbow and make room, so that that we're running the table,
Yeah, we're a team. And I couldn't agree.
Right.
Okay, so in your new book, right, you which I didn't actually mention the title. So to go back to what I was saying in the beginning, I saw the word warrior in her book, and I was like, who is this? I got so excited. So the title of her book, for all of you to check it out on Amazon, please. I actually read the summary. It's amazing. Is She Will Rise, Becoming a Warrior in a Battle for True Equality. You share the negative experiences you had within your political tenure in misogyny and double standards, of which me too, but not in politics. Can you tell us and you don't have to tell us everything, whatever you're comfortable with, really. Tell us what happened there and how that shaped what you deliver in this book, which you believe will help women crush these standards.
Yeah. So from the very beginning, what I learned was that it is so much harder for women to even enter politics, even to begin to consider it, right? So we're kind of behind the game in, from day one. And actually the research backs that up, that from the time we start, by the time we start our first jobs, by the time we finish college, we're already making less than our male counterparts with no experience in an entry-level job. So, the same thing is in politics. If you're making less money, if you've assumed more caregiving roles of whatever type, whether it's, of your own parents or family, or of your kids, if you have them, and just this book is full of statistics on how it kind of shapes that, right? With income inequality and how, basically we're having to work twice as hard to get half as far in many cases. Don't quote me on the exact.
No, but Dorsey and Whitney has some stats on that. So it's hard to keep up with them. So
I know it's overwhelming when you do, but the book, it has them. I've got the sources all in there. And so my, I guess, what I was thinking was, or what I'm saying is that from day one, we have fewer connections to ways into politics. We don't have it's harder for us to ask for money for a variety of reasons. And it's just generally more of a barrier, both internally for us saying, I can't do that, I'm not qualified. Perfect example. I've been trying to convince a few of my former colleagues, not from Congress, but from a past life, to do a project. And the first thing I've heard from all of them is, I'm not qualified for that.
Really?
What and why? And I say, why are you not qualified? But we do that in politics too. We say, I'm not qualified to run. Somebody's got to be more qualified than me. And so then you have the external bias too. You've got, I had men say over and over, I just don't think a woman could beat a man. I don't think a woman could beat Steve Knight. I actually had women say that too. I had, the way that you're treated by voters that are just straightly misogynistic, but even the ones, even how you're treated by women who say, you're, you shouldn't be wearing those kinds of flowery dresses, or you need to be more serious.
Different values, right?
Yeah. So, that plays out, I guess, all the way ultimately leading to my resignation.
It's absolutely terrible, So, I mean, unless you're talking about a strength contest, in my opinion, a woman can do anything a man can do. So I'm very surprised to hear that. Was that 2017 or something, right?
Which part?
The piece about the men and the women, especially the women, telling you that you can't win. It's
2017. They were using Hillary versus Trump as the reason. Evidence.
Come on, that's a whole humongous podcast episode.
I know.
That I'm not getting into.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
But no, that was that. So it was absolutely then. It was like, there was so much of it. It was coded in, well, I hate to say this, or, of course I don't believe this, but the voters, or, we saw how sexist people are. And so if, for the good of the party or for the good of the seat, you should step aside and let the guy run.
I have a question, but I don't know if I should ask it. I'm going to ask it because I think you might know it. So as an average citizen, and many of people are, we vote, of course, but we don't really know what's going on. Are there certain groups that you believe within the political structure that you were in that are set up to hold women back? Or, is it historical? Is it values? Or is it something real? People talk about it a lot, and I don't know the answer.
Yeah, well, no, I think it really is. It's a historical thing. Yeah. And it's the fact that we have just barely in the construct of time been able to be part of this process at all. And so, we're starting from zero. We're starting from just getting the right to vote only for white women 100 years ago. Yeah, and by the time that we've gotten anywhere in terms of actual representation at higher levels, just like in business, it's gone tiny bits of change, and then finally we're kind of at a point where it's getting bigger. I see it's like a curve, right?
Yeah.
So, but that means that we've just got so much work to do in terms of pushing it off. We've got literally completely internalized and forever reinforced visions of what leadership looks like that is not female, and so for people to just, even in their own mind's eye, visualize that a woman can be president or a woman can be the one in charge, in whether it's in the boardroom or in the White House, you're going against all of that socialized kind of way of thinking.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I like that you brought up the analogy of business and politics.
Yeah.
So in business, our leadership levels, C-level executives at Fortune 100 companies, we go from like 2 to 4% in a matter of 30 years, let's say, right? The point is, it's a small percentage of growth, and it continues to be hard. And so in my work, I work with executives, so male and female. Anyway, so I see my outside view is I see this attempt to strengthen that and grow those numbers by building women's groups, women's efforts, women's initiatives.
Yep.
And some of me thinks that creates a little bit of a divide, I don't know what you think about it. Like when you mentioned that there was a Nancy Pelosi and a kind of a women's group, it helps women, but do you think there's a way that we can truly create equality? Because I still think that's in business, that tends to be an issue. So
yeah, well, I think for me, and I think that this was just so reinforced by what I saw while I was in Congress, but also in other aspects of life. I think the best way that you can get equality for any group is by achieving representation at the leadership table. And that doesn't mean that you're trying to force people out. That doesn't mean that you're trying to, kind of abscond with power, but you're asking to share it. And you're saying that we've got to make room for people who reflect half of the population, women, to make up half of the leadership positions. And we're asking for, people of color. If you make up 10% of your organization as a whole, or if you make up 10% of your client base, or whatever it is, we want it to be reflective of our consumer base, or of our staff, and of the population when we're talking about government. And that's only fair, and that's the only way that you're going to get the proper interests of those groups and priorities of those groups to really be pushed to the front in a genuine way. And for so long, we've had any group that's not old, straight, white, wealthy men has been pushed to the side. And so we know, and that basically means that we've still got this big old group of old, wealthy, straight, white men that kind of have to get, squeezed.
Or they have to embrace everything.
Right. Yeah. And it can be an expansion. It doesn't have to be,
it doesn't.
Shoving people out.
Right. I think I think that's my point. This has nothing to do with politics, but I had a conversation with a recruiter last year, and it opened up my eyes to something I never knew. I said to him, we were talking about executive jobs, because my clients, I'm like, sometimes they want to get a new job and it's a secret, whatever. And he said to me, most of the jobs that you see out there, they're just fishing to fill a quota of women and colored people. And I'm like, what? Yeah. So part of me, I'm in equality. The way that I think of equality is actually just embracing a person without looking at their name or their color. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I 100% get that. And I know a number of talented younger white guys who have worked for me, or who I know who have actually struggled to get jobs for the same reason. And
exactly.
And my dad has talked about that in the 90s, the first time affirmative action. But the truth is, it's almost like it's time, right? Like it's just so hard for us to be able to kind of counter the fact that we that there was no way of ensuring that equality, because of just the advantage and the privileges that have been kind of foisted upon, or not foisted upon, but that have been kept away from everyone else. We just have to find a way of making up for it, and that doesn't mean that it's going to be true. That doesn't mean that it's going to feel fair to each individual person. And instead, it's going to have to be more macro. It's going to have to be more societal. And sometimes that means that it's going to be harder. It's going to be like it was for women for so long, or for people of color for so long, for a white guy to get a job. And it's just a role reversal. But of course, it's new for them. So it's like that much more difficult to conceive of, and they feel more oppressed by it.
Yeah. Well, I like what you talked about representation, because I feel that you don't have to hold a huge leadership position in life to make a difference, right?
Oh, yeah.
You can represent something in your community, or within your company, or within your industry, or your neighborhood, right?
Yep.
And
yeah, it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be going to Congress, right? It can be in a million different ways. It could be on your school board. It could be, or not even, it could be in your PTA. It could be in your neighborhood association. It can be anywhere that I think that's kind of the obligation. If we want equality, if any group wants equality, then you do need to show up. And that means by voting, that means by volunteering in these kinds of places, that means by kind of in many ways stepping into the uncomfortable, stepping into the places that we've been kept out of, and that therefore don't necessarily feel natural to us.
Yeah. So when you come across, or you had come across, or maybe you still come across it, obstacles, from a woman achieving her next step in something, can you share advice on how you counter those conversations in a positive way?
So can you give me an example, like what?
Yeah, sure. So if you let's say in your either your current work now, or when you held a seat in Congress, as you came across situations where you were told that you were told that you couldn't do something in a room full of people, where you had that seat, or you had that position, but because being a woman, someone told you couldn't do something.
Yeah.
That's my question, because I know a lot of women come across this. Or you brought up the example, which I liked, about women not asking for the money that they deserve, which is something I talk about a lot. So, and I think I talk about this psychology on the show all the time, and I think it's a lot of like internal. But I guess those type of conflicts, whether it's internal and you have someone sitting in front of you and you can't ask for the money, or it's external, you ask for something and you get shot down because you're a woman. Can you just, any example you can share specifically, and how you got around it?
Well, I guess the easiest example is, and because I already brought this up, was when people would say to me, I don't think a woman can beat Steve Knight, or I don't think, I think you should step aside for the man because he's got a better shot of winning, or beating the Republican. And the way that I would approach it then was, to always, to really, you can't internalize it, right? That's a big part of it, is you have to use that as something that kind of solidifies your will and strengthens your desire to move forward. And so for me, I wouldn't get offended by it. I would also not feel the need to lay into them, because that just doesn't serve your purposes. No. But instead I would say, well, I understand your concern. We're just going to have to prove you wrong. So, or it depends on who it was, right? I would also change it to be something like, well, I guess we'll just have to see about that, or, something to that effect. And, I'm sorry, I don't share your perspective on that, and then just kind of politely move on. I think that's a different situation than if you're being openly discriminated in the workplace. And that's one where you have to take recourse, whether it's going through your union, if you have a union. If you don't have a union, it's helping to form a union. It's filing the complaints necessary, and it's not allowing things to just happen anymore. We have to collectively point this out and say that this is unacceptable. And that doesn't mean being a martyr. That doesn't mean going out and looking personally, I'm like this, if a guy says something inappropriate to me, I'm not necessarily going to go file a complaint with HR. I'm going to say something to him first, and be like, hey, that was and this happened to me in Congress. There was a guy who, if there's these things called 1 minutes, and they're these speeches that anyone can give, any member of Congress can give, and you basically have certain times that you can give it. And one time I went, and there was this guy that he was in leadership in one part of leadership with me, so I saw him all the time, and he he was always there. And so I said, oh, hey, you're Mr. 1 Minute Man. And by the way, I'm standing here with a group of other young women who are the freshman members of Congress. And he goes, I'll be your Mr. 1 Minute Man. And it's just like, ew, you know what I mean? And like, this guy's like, he's like older than my dad. And just like, you don't say that to, you just don't say,
you don't say that in that.
You don't say that to somebody who's your peer
in college. It's just terrible.
And so there were people like the other girls, no, I shouldn't call them girls, the other young women, were, they were like, did he just say that? Like, this is your colleague. This is not somebody who's, but did I go to Nancy Pelosi and rat him out? No, I said something like, hey, the next time I saw him, I was like, dude, you can't say that kind of thing. And of course he was mortified, and I did call it out in the press though. I did an interview about it, but I didn't say who it was. And so, I think that there was enough public shaming involved that didn't directly out him, that I didn't need to try and file some kind of official complaint and ruin him. Right. I guess I think that was a slightly weird tangent, but just how you.
It's not a weird tangent. I went through it in my career too. I had and I got fired. I got fired for calling somebody out.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
But then I called his wife, so.
Well, so that's
women always win in the end.
That's my point.
But in politics it's so different. It must be so, like you said, you can't leak certain information, and it must be very difficult.
Yeah, but the truth is too, the only way that we stop it from being possible for women to get fired for coming forward for those kinds of things is to come forward collectively, and not to, if it's happening on a regular basis, and usually it's not if it's an isolated incident, then I would say the guy doesn't deserve to get fired. He needs to learn something. Yeah. But if it's something that's happening to many women over and over again, it's a different situation. And someone's not going to get fired if all of us come forward. So, it's recognizing the power that we have in groups and how necessary that is if we are going to change things in the long run.
I mean, look at the Me Too thing. I mean, it's
exactly.
I think it got a little bit, personally, I think it got a little bit overboard. I mean, I start to feel bad for some men that were afraid to even go to work at some point,
Yeah.
So that's the balance. It's a balance.
And I talked about that in the book too, because I'm on a list of Me Too perpetrators because of the power dynamics in my relationship. And I'm horrified by that. I think that that's to even lump me in the category of, Harvey Weinstein is just disgusting. It makes me have a visceral reaction to it. But my, but I talk about it as like, what's the accountability we want to see from people? What's the correct amount of atonement? And for, this scale, right? This entire range of I don't know, indiscretion or straight up criminal offense.
Right. Yeah. There's a scale. Right. Some could be criminal and some is not. So, okay. So, all right. So my favorite question is always about warrior women. So all my guests, I ask them how they define a warrior woman in business. So for you, I'm going to say, how do you define a warrior woman in business and in politics? Talk about that. When you think of that, who do you see or what do you see?
So I see a warrior woman as somebody who doesn't back down, who gets hurt but also keeps going. Who is willing to just take on the fight, and I think that's the case in either business or politics, and that means that you are often going to be the only one in the room. You are often going to face the crap that we were just talking about, and that sometimes it's going to be really hard not to take it personally, because it can feel so personal. But it means that you are continuing to go, and and that's really why I use the metaphor in my book of warrior women, is because that's, we warriors are tough. We're not just brave until we get hurt and then we go away. That would make us more princesses. Warriors keep going. And so I think, I think that that's kind of how I would define it at any place in life, whether it's work or whether it's business or politics or even in the family.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. It is about, you're constantly getting, I feel like the more that you strive for equality, the more that you strive for what you want, the more you're going to get hit or criticized.
I completely agree.
And I love what you said about not taking it personally. I mean, I have, that is, I think for me personally, I think that's the hardest thing, not taking it personally. It's really hard, especially as a woman, we care so much, right?
We do. And especially when you're hearing it from other women too. I think that's one of the hardest times that I've had. And you will, you will, because there's this internalized misogyny that that is going to take us a long time, at least another generation, to sort of start to break down. And I think we are seeing it with the younger generation, but it's so much has just changed in the last, let's just use the 100 years from when we got the right to vote. And it's taken a long time. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the one who made it possible for women to get lines of credit on their own. That only happened in my grandma's lifetime. Yeah. So, I think it's just recognizing that we're part of something that's much bigger than ourselves. And each of us has a role to play in pushing things forward, not just for our own advancement in career or politics or otherwise, but in terms of for women as a whole, and what that means for the women who come after us.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it really is, at the end of the day, right? It's you have a singular goal, but like you said, if you open up your eyes to the fact that there's all these other women out there, and you can have effect on them, and they can have effect on others, then there's this culmination. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so a couple more questions before we go into Q&A on Facebook. So I'm going to ask the obvious question because of the presidential debate last night, which I did watch. Anyway, so I don't comment on anything, anyway. Yeah. But I want to know, my audience would definitely want to know your opinion on the female candidates. What you're thinking about, the female candidate and vice president, Supreme Court, and other local female officials. Yeah. What do you think about what they're doing? How do you think they're going to fare? What do you know about
Sure. Well, let me start with what basically what I did as my next step after leaving Congress. I decided that I wanted to start an organization that was about helping women get elected. And so it's called Her Time. And it's a political action committee. And that means that we support candidates. We can spend money on their behalf. We can donate money to them, raise money on their behalf, and do different kinds of research around this idea of mobilizing young women as a voting group, electing them to office, and then advocating for the issues that matter and that are going to affect us. So, it's
Her Time, right? Her Time.
Her Time, HER-time.com. And with that, we're I guess for me, that's kind of where what I think it all comes down to is basically we need other groups. We need women to support women to get us elected. I think and that's kind of what the book is all about, is how do we ultimately get to the point where women are succeeding at the ballot box, because it's going to take an intentionality to get there. But Kamala Harris she was my first. I endorsed her as soon as she started running for president. So the fact that she is the VP pick is, I'm thrilled by. I feel good about it. I think that she's. I just have a good feeling, but can't get complacent at all. And then I'm really optimistic. I think that this is going to be another wave of women getting elected in higher numbers than we've seen ever before. As far as the women Supreme Court pick, I have an issue with her because she's a woman who makes decisions that are anti-women. And I've talked about it before, but there are some women who have truly internalized misogyny, and forcing that upon other women is just not acceptable.
Do they do that? Because I don't know much about that, but so did they do that to gain these power positions, or do they really believe that? I mean, what's their intention?
I think that they've internalized it so much, either through their upbringing, their religion, or their own experiences,
I see.
Lack of confidence, whatever it is, that they truly believe that women, or at least some women, maybe it's not them, right? Maybe they have a carve out of them, or have a different role in society, and maybe they don't see it. You often hear this argument that it's not inferior, it's just different. What's her name? Phyllis something or other. I forget. She was the one that they made Mrs. America about, and I didn't even watch it. But she's the anti-suffragette. She's the anti-equality ERA person, and Phyllis Schlafly.
Okay.
So that they basically, women are anti-choice, anti-abortion, anti all these, anti-birth control, women getting equal pay, all these kinds of things. And I think it comes from a fundamental lack of understanding of how these policies and these things are actually keeping us back. And how, if you're not white and privileged, then it probably isn't helping. You probably don't have any semblance of equality because of these things. So.
Wow, that's terrible to hear. I want to go change it right now. What? I mean, do those women understand that it's beautiful to be a woman? And
I think that
we have these, these choices are so important. I just, for themselves, never mind other women.
I know. I think it's
kind of shocking. I'm sorry.
I think it honestly is changing. Like we used to see women. I truly think it is. I think it's changing, but it's taking time, and it's overwhelmingly women over 55.
Right.
So like the studies just show that in a huge way. And so but not all, like Tommy Lahren or whatever her name is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's definitely it's a social work in progress. And I
think I'm going to invite them to our next event.
There you go.
Oh, yes, I am. I'm giving them Warrior Women t-shirts. Okay. So, we are going to be going to questions in just a minute. We only have, we have a certain time. So for everyone that is listening or watching, so Katie is going to be giving away a copy of her book, or maybe copies, whatever she wants to do. So there is a form, an RSVP form. If you haven't filled it out yet, my assistant will be putting that link into the Facebook chat. But again, her book is, for any of you who want to go check it out today, which you all should, it's really good. She Will Rise, Becoming a Warrior in the Battle for True Equality. So by Katie. All right.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. Thank you for being on the show. So we're going to go now to Facebook Q&A. I'm just going to be waiting here for a second to get some questions rolling from the audience. So please, if anybody has any questions and you're on Facebook, just put them into the comment box. That's all you need to do. Any questions for Katie about all the topics that we talked about today?
Or whatever.
Whatever you want to ask. I just need to check. Okay, I'm waiting here. We can chat while she's getting them up.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's a crazy time.
It's a crazy time. That's something I definitely wanted to talk about as we wait for questions.
Yeah.
There's so much. There's so much going on. I feel that the other thing that I wanted to ask you is, there's this. It's as women, we're now in the place where we are fighting for equality. We're looking to make things happen and make change. But there's also so much other change that's happening right now in the world with race, communities, politics, law enforcement changes, which I'm so not happy about.
Oh, yeah.
You have no idea how. We wrote a song that got released this week, my band. And I'm just, all this violence is it's terrible. I mean, I personally think that's not helping change. So,
yeah. I mean, it's really difficult. So my dad is he's about to retire, but he's a 30-year law enforcement member. He's a captain now. And, they want to make the changes too, but it's also, there's just this, I don't know how anyone would want to be a cop right now. So it's a weird time for sure. And it's going to be hard to make those changes.
It's a scary time. Well, I do have a question about that. Women in predominantly male roles. Okay. Yeah. So, firefighters, policemen, these traditional plumbers, traditionally male roles, construction workers. Mm-hmm. Actually, in my neighborhood, it's something I've been noticing is there's always construction here. Always.
Yeah.
But I've been noticing more female construction workers, and I think it's great. But I usually only see one, and then a group of like 30.
Right.
So what about the women out there that aren't interested in traditional business or traditional jobs, and they actually want to work in these male-dominated industries?
Yeah.
Like unions. I mean, how did they get in?
Well, that's what I was going to say, is actually the unions, every one of those jobs that you just listed off is in many places a union job. And the unions are really actively trying to get more women, to increase that representation and to make it so that women can kind of make up a bigger portion of people in these fields, because it matters, right? Perspectives matter. I mean, okay, you're going to have
perspectives really matter.
Yeah. If you have like this crazy, like the iron workers, for example, there are some women who really want to do and can do that extremely kind physical labor, but like I don't want to, you know what I mean? And so there are some that are just going to naturally, I think, stay that way. But for others, I think it's about maintaining it. Yeah, the unions and many of the agencies themselves, there are a lot of extra opportunities for women to try and get in. And I would say that wherever it is, this is a good moment to try and make that, and to try and kind of put yourself in that path, but also know that you will be a trailblazer, and that means that you'll run up against the challenges that we've talked about.
Yeah, and so right, and as you're going through that, there's going to be a lot of threats around you, just like you mentioned, women saying that you can't do it, men saying that you can't do it.
Yep.
And I guess is your advice for them to kind of keep going and just
if you feel if you feel like this is something you want to do, if you feel committed to it, and then prove them wrong. Just prove them wrong. And I think that that's a really, like, for me at least, that's a big motivator, and it has been my whole life. So and I think that might be for me at least, I think that's something that probably could apply to a lot of people.
Yeah, sure. I mean, absolutely. In most careers, I started my career with IBM, and when I started, it was mainly men.
Yep.
I'm like, all right, let's keep going. It's where I am, and it's what I want to do.
And the more people tell you can't do something, the more you want to do it.
I love when people tell me I can't do something.
Exactly.
I see you're the same. I'm like, okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
Keep telling. I don't like when they bash you for no reason.
No.
Because
you shouldn't put up with it, but
that's not fun, and that's not right, and they're just doing it to put you down. But but yeah, I mean, absolutely. All right, I don't know if we have any questions. The thing is hanging here, and it's fine. So anything else you want to share with my audience in terms of how they can contact you? Something that they should be aware of that you're doing coming up besides the book, Anything else you want to share?
So a couple of things. One is her time is her-time.com. You can sign up there to get alerts. We're keeping everyone up to date about the candidates. We've got some polling that's going to be coming out soon. So sign up there and follow us on all the social media. There's I don't personally have a Facebook presence, but Her Time does. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Katie Hill, the number 4 CA. And I'm known to say some snarky things once or twice a day.
Hey, that's Twitter.
Yeah. And then on top of that, the book, we have resources around different things, including how to get involved, resources in case you are being discriminated against. And that's at shewillrisebook.com. And the last thing is that I'm launching a podcast, and that's going to be coming up soon. Called Naked Politics, and it's about getting behind the scenes and talking about scandal and everything that is kind of unknown and unfiltered in the political scene. And that's if you want to sign up to get alerts on that, it's nakedpolitics.com. Oh, sorry, nakedpoliticspodcast.com.
Okay, nakedpoliticspodcast.com.
Yep.
What were the other? So that we can put this in the Facebook thread.
Her-time.com.
Right? And then the book URL?
The shewillrisebook.com.
Shewillrisebook.
And then at Katie Hill for CA.
At Katie Hill for CA. I'm for CA too. I hope these wildfires, it's just so.
Yeah.
Oh, someone has to do something.
I know. It's.
Okay, I do have a last question because it's really actually bothering me. It's not about women. It's just about the world. So how do you think politics can really play a good role in solving these environmental issues? Like really, without me having to listen to another presidential debate, what do you think?
Well, I mean, the truth is this is where elections really do matter, because people we need the political will to do something dramatic and fast. And it has to be, the decisions have to be rooted in what's going to benefit the people, not big corporations and special interest groups. And for too long, those are the very forces that have made these kinds of decisions. So the reason that the Republican members of Congress and even Democrats before haven't wanted to put in these really strict regulations around fossil fuels or curbing emissions or anything like that is because, hello, the gas companies, I mean, the oil companies don't want them to. They know how much harder that's going to make their jobs and how they're going to have to innovate and
they will have to innovate.
Yeah. And so that's the role that the government can play. And when you elect people who are not accountable to those, that's why all of the candidates that we're supporting in her time are not taking corporate PAC money, because I think that the only way that you can be accountable, and this is, you need, women are important, like that's obviously its own thing, but in addition to that, it's really, truly important to me that that politicians are not putting the best interests of, they need to be putting the best interests of citizens and society and their voters first, and not these corporations, or we'll never get the change we need on the environment or any other issue.
Okay, and then I have another question. Sorry, this is all related to this because I think it'll help people.
Yeah.
So how do we, I mean, when you're voting, you're voting based on, I mean, my opinion is a lot of times you're voting on promises. Maybe you do a lot of research. So are there any ways that voters can measure or kind of understand what they can expect? I mean, that as a voter, that's the one thing I always hear. It's the one thing, I don't believe him or her,
Yeah. I think
without the knowledge, it's always difficult,
I think I'm always looking for people who are honest. And so I want somebody who's going to acknowledge, yes, this is the vision, but I know what it's going to take to get there. And that's something that I did when I was running, was very much, that I want to get to zero emissions by 20, whatever. I forget even what the goals of the Green New Deal were, but that I recognize that we're not going to be able to do that overnight, and that it's going to take us being able to help these businesses to make those transitions, or we're going to be out, millions of jobs. And so I think that you want somebody who's going to truly, and that's hard because the pressure, especially on the primary side, is like overwhelming to make these promises that people know you can't keep.
That's why I brought it up. Seems extremely difficult.
So I look for, I also think that people play different roles in a democracy and in a representative democracy. So for example, people who are coming from these really far left districts, their role is to push the party. Their role is to push us to these, to these far-reaching plans. And then it's kind of the role of the others to sort of balance that back into something that's more reflective of the entire country and of what's possible in the immediate. So I think it's just like demand change, that change happens quickly, and then and don't allow for it not to. Keep that pressure on, but know at least that it will never happen if you don't keep that pressure on, but know that your efforts aren't for nothing, even if it's taking longer than you want.
So, and I'm assuming, it sounds to me like politics aren't that far from business and running a business.
No,
I don't think so. Because I have certain priorities. Every business owner has certain priorities. And it sounds to me like the role of our government is to look at what the priorities are.
Yep.
And prioritize them and achieve them, right?
I wish that it was treated more like that. And you always hear certain wings say we should treat government more like business, and I think that they mean it wrong. They're talking about running a profit, and they're talking about
always focusing on the economy.
But instead we need to be talking about running it like a business, or running it like an organization that has an actual mission and measurable, achievable goals, and these outcomes that we're going to be expecting within a certain time frame. And I think that if we had that kind of approach, and there was less of a focus on getting reelected and the politics and the bullshit behind it, then our government would work a lot better.
Yeah, well, they need people like you. There you go. Really, you're so open about it, and you always hear that you can't talk to politicians and they're all liars, and it's so refreshing to
I'm
have
just here on the
some-
outside, you know,
Yeah, but
I'll
you-
exert my influence from from over
Yeah,
here.
but
for
you
now.
know, you've been on the inside and you talk about it in a way where you're not bashing you, you're just being honest.
Yeah.
And I think that honesty is really important when we think about how we want to change this country,
Yeah.
because in my opinion, this country could be so great, and
Right.
there's
I
just
agree.
there's so many problems right now. We got to tackle one at a
Yep.
time and just
Yep.
come together. So
I know.
anyway, sorry.
I agree.
That's how I feel. All right, so I think we're done with time. I want to thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
First
thank
of all,
you.
good luck on everything. You have
Thank
so
you
many
so
great
much.
things going on. Her time, the podcast, which actually sounds very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited for it.
I think you're gonna have a lot of fans. So the book, the podcast, her time. So for my audience, yeah, please RSVP. The link is in Facebook. If not, just email us at info@warriorwomenbusiness.com. In the show notes, after we send out the edited version of this podcast on all of our channels, Spotify, YouTube, blah, 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 we will put all of Katie's links in there so you can contact her. You don't have to write this all down today. And the last two things I do want to mention again is October 24th, if you're in New York, we're going to be having our first, finally, post-COVID event, which is going to be fun on the Lower East Side. So that'll be on warriorwomenbusiness.com. And then any of you that are thinking about a fashion business, we have Tina Trevino, who's the coolest woman, fashion designer, Takaya Brands. You can check them out online. And, you know, if you're interested, let us know. Go to warriorwomenbusiness.com. This is Jasmine Sandler signing out for episode 30 with Katie Hill. Again, thank you so much.
Thanks.